Good day, everyone. Before everything else, I would like to introduce my name first. I am Rihanna Bianca Britannia Aquino from grade 11 Alpha. Today, I myself and Miss Decent Faith Mabitad will be reporting about how layers of stratified rocks are formed. Rocks might seem simple and unchanging, but they hold the history of Earth changes over millions of years. By understanding how layers of rocks form, we can also learn the natural processes that shape our planet. When we look around, we see rocks everywhere, right? In backyards, rivers, mountains, or even in construction sites. Some rocks are large, like boulders, while others are tiny, like sand and gravel. But have you ever wondered where they come from? Rocks don't just appear. They created in different ways by forces of nature. Scientists, especially geologists, have grouped rock into three main types based on how they form. So as you can see dyan sa kilid, that is only the main point or the keywords upang mas maintindihan ninyo ng mas madalian. Itong sasabihin ko sa inyo is parang ina-expand ko na lang upang mas maintindihan in deeper level. Let's start with the igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are formed from molten rock, also called magma, which comes from deep inside the earth where it's very hot. When magma cools down, it hardens and becomes a solid rock. This can happen through above the surface and below the surface. When we talk about above the surface, this is during the volcanic eruption when lava cools quickly. Example is the basalt and pumice. When we talk about below the surface, this is where the magma cools slowly, forming a rock with larger crystals. For example, is the granite and diorite. So our igneous rock is the starting point for the rock cycle because they created or they formed directly from molten material. Next is the sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are made from sediments, which are tiny particles of broken rocks, minerals, or even remain plants and animals. Here how it happens. First is withering. Withering is to break down rocks into small pieces. Next is erosion. Erosion is to carry those pieces into new places like lakes, rivers, and oceans. So they move into water places. And over time, the sediments settle in layers. And as more layers pile up, the wheat presses them together. This process is called compaction because from the word compaction, it means nagko-compact sila. Nagko-compact sila by wheat. Because our layers at first is very soft or weak. But the more layers pile up on the top of the layers, the width of the upper layers presses in the lower layers. That's why parang nabibuild siya stronger. And finally, the minerals and the water glue the layers together. This process is called cementation. So the cementation is the last processes to form a sedimentary rocks. And what is the role of our cement? Is to glue or to stick the layers together. So our sedimentary rocks often show visible layers, which makes them easy to identify. For example, is the limestone, sandstone, and shale. Lastly is metamorphic rocks. Metamorphic rocks form when existing rocks undergo heat and pressure deep within the earth, but without melting. These changes lead to the transformation of one rock type into another. For example, is the limestone turn into marble, the shale turn into slate. So they transform or they change into something new. So our metamorphic rocks tells us about the condition deep inside the earth. Each type of rock is made through specific process. Let's talk about this process and how they are connected through something called the rock cycle. So the rock cycle is a concept that explains how rocks are connected and how one type can change over time. So this is the key processes in the rock cycle. First is the melting and cooling. Melting and cooling where the igneous rocks are formed. Next is the withering and erosion, which break down rocks and move sediments. Third is the compaction and cementation, which form sedimentary rocks. Lastly, the heat and pressure, which change rocks into metamorphic ones. These forces are what drive the rock cycle and create new rock continuously. Now, let's focus on stratified rocks, which are usually sedimentary rocks. Stratified rocks are layers of rocks that form over time, often in bodies of water. This layer developed through the following processes. First is the sediments settle in layers, often in places like rivers, lakes, and oceans. So they move into water areas. Next is the layers are compacted by weight. So as what I've said kanina, as more layers pile up on the top of the layers, the weight in the upper layers presses them together. That's why that process is called compaction. Kasi nagko-compact sila. The layers are compacted by weight. Lastly is the mineral cement layers together. So the minerals in the water glue the layers together to form a solid rock. So this layer can tell us about different time periods and environmental conditions, which is why stratified rocks are so useful in studying Earth history. This picture simply shows us a stratification to the layering of sedimentary rocks, where sediment layers vary in thickness and shape. Yeah, as you can see, forming distinct bands that reveal information about the environment in which the rock formed.
How layers of rocks are formed. Sedimentary rocks are formed from particles of pre-existing rocks or organic debris, which accumulate in rivers, lakes, and oceans. Over time, these sediments are compacted and cemented, transforming into rocks like conglomerate, sandstone, mudstone, or shale, and may preserve fossils. So the rocks layers are formed by erosion and weathering of mountains, and the particles are transported and deposited in the sedimentary basin. Then the sediment particles are cemented over hundreds of years to form layers. These sediments are deposited horizontally by gravity. Layered rocks may also result from successive lava flow or from the formation of extrusive igneous rocks. So here are the law of how layers of rocks are formed. First, the law of superposition. So the law of superposition holds that in undisturbed rocks layers, the youngest layer is on top and the oldest on the bottom, reflecting their relative ages. So in here, it indicates the relative ages of rocks and the fossils in them. So the second is the law of original horizontality. So the law of original horizontality is that sediments layer are initially deposited horizontally under gravity, and any tilting indicates later geological events like earthquakes or mountain building. So in here, law is the law states that layers of sediments were originally deposited horizontally under the action of gravity. It suggests that all rocks layers are originally laid down or deposited horizontally and can later be deformed. This allows us to infer that something must have happened to the rocks to make them tilted. This includes mountain buildings events, earthquakes, and salting. So lastly, the law of lateral continuity. So the law of lateral continuity rock layers extend continuously until interrupted by solid bodies or altered by pond deposition events like erosion or faulting. So in this law states that the layers of rocks are continuous until they encounter other solid bodies that block their deposition or until they are acted upon by agents that appear after deposition takes place such as erosion and fault movements.